in a dramatic and potentially world-altering escalation of economic statecraft. The Trump administration has delivered a stark ultimatum to Beijing, demanding that China sever its comprehensive support for Russia's war economy or face crippling American sanctions. This momentous policy shift, communicated through both private diplomatic channels and a series of forceful public statements, represents the most direct challenge ever issued to the strategic partnership between China and Russia. The White House has made it clear that it views Chinese material and financial support as the primary lifeline sustaining Russia's war in Ukraine and its burgeoning military alliance with Iran. The administration is now leveraging the full weight of the United States economy to force China into a choice it has long sought to avoid, to either abandon its most important strategic partner or risk being locked out of the global financial system and its most lucrative export market. The ultimatum was formally conveyed in a communication from Secretary of State Marco Rubio to his Chinese counterpart. The diplomatic language was reportedly firm and unambiguous, outlining a series of specific demands and a clear deadline for compliance. These demands include a complete cessation of exports of dual-use technologies to Russia, such as advanced microchips, machine tools, and raw materials used in munition manufacturing. Furthermore, Washington is demanding that Chinese financial institutions halt all transactions with sanctioned Russian banks and entities, effectively cutting off financial plumbing that has allowing Moscow to circumvent Western restriction. The demand also extends to energy, insisting that Chinese state-owned firms cease purchasing Russian oil and gas at prices that provide a war premium to the Kremlin. The message was unequivocal. China's claim of neutrality are no longer credible, and the time for choosing a side has arrived. President Donald Trump personally drove this point home in a nationally televised address from the Oval Office. Speaking directly to the American people, he framed the issue in stark transactional terms. He accused Beijing of playing a double game by profiting from trade with the United States while simultaneously fueling the fire of a war that threatened our allies and our interests. President Trump declared that China had become the chief arsenal for Russia's aggression, enabling the protracted conflict and the resulting instability that led to the dangerous Russia-Iran axis. He stated that under his watch, America would no longer tolerate being taken advantage of. His administration, he vowed, would use every economic tool at its disposal to ensure that Beijing understood that there would be a steep price to pay for underwriting an adversary of the United States. The primary weapon in the administration's arsenal is the threat of secondary sanction, a tool of immense power to be wielded by the Department of the Treasury. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent has been tasked with preparing what sources inside the department are calling the most extensive and punitive sanctions package ever designed. The plan would target China's largest state-owned bank, financial institutions that are deeply integrated into the global economy. Under this threat, if a major institution like the Bank of China or the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China were found to be processing payment for Russia's war effort, the Treasury Department Office of Foreign Asset Control, or OFAC, would have the authority to designate it as a sanctioned entity. Such a designation would be a financial death sentence. It would immediately cut the bank off from its ability to transact in US dollars, the lifeblood of international trade and finance. All of the bank's assets within US jurisdiction would be frozen, and any international firm that continued to do business with it would itself risk being sanctioned. For a global bank, losing access to the dollar is an extinction-level event. Secretary Benson's team has made it clear to international financial leaders that the United States is fully prepared to pull this trigger. The threat is not just aimed at the largest bank, it extends to smaller regional banks, technology companies, and shipping lines that have been identified by U.S. intelligence as key nodes in the China to Russia supply chain. The message from the Treasury is simple. You can do business with Russia or you can do business with the United States, but you cannot do both. Complementing the financial threat is the equally potent weapon of tariff. a signature policy of the Trump presidency. The United States Trade Representative Jamison Greer, a known hardliner on China trade policy, has been working in concert with the White House to develop a new schedule of punitive tariffs that would dwarf those imposed during the previous trade war. The proposal on the table is reportedly a blanket tariff of 60% or higher on all goods imported from China. Such a move would have a devastating impact on the Chinese economy, which remains heavily dependent on exports to the American market. It would make Chinese goods prohibitively expensive for American consumers and businesses, likely triggering a mass exodus of manufacturing and supply chains from China to other countries like Vietnam, Mexico, and India. Jamison Greer's office has emphasized that this is not a negotiating tactic, but a prepared response that will be implemented automatically if Beijing failed to comply with the administration's demand regarding Russia. The administration's rationale for such a high-stake confrontation has been articulated by its top national security officials. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth presented the military case in a briefing at the Pentagon. He argued that China's support for Russia is a direct threat to American national security. By supplying Russia with the component needed to build modern weapons, China is helping to deplete Western military stockpiles that are being sent to Ukraine. More strategically, Secretary Hegseth sees the Ukraine conflict as a laboratory for China. He believed Beijing is closely watching the Western response to learn how to weather sanctions and prepare for a potential future conflict over Taiwan. By cutting off China's support for Russia now, he argues the United States not only crippled Russia's ability to wage war in Europe, but also send a powerful deterrent message to Beijing about the potential consequences of its own future aggression in the Indo-Pacific. This view is supported by the intelligence community. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has presented a comprehensive assessment to the president that detailed the precise nature of Chinese support for Russia's military-industrial base. His report, based on satellite imagery, financial tracking, and human sources, have provided what one official called irrefutable proof that Chinese state-directed assistance is the single most important factor allowing Russia to sustain its offensive. While Director Gabbard has often advocated for a less interventionist foreign policy, her office role is to present the unvarnished facts. This intelligence provides the factual foundations for the administration's aggressive policy, framing it not as a choice but as a necessary response to document actions by Beijing. In Beijing, the American ultimatum has been met with public fury and private panic. The Chinese Foreign Ministry immediately issued a scathing rebuke, denouncing the American move as naked economic coercion and hegemonic bullying. A spokesperson accused Washington of hypocrisy, pointing out that the United States was the largest supplier of weapons in the world. They reiterate China's official position of promoting peace talks and denied providing lethal aid to any party in the conflict. This defined public stance, however, masks a deep and agonizing dilemma for the Chinese leadership. Behind the closed doors of Zhongyang, the leadership compound in Beijing, President Xi Jinping and his inner circle are facing their most difficult strategic choice in decades. The no-limits partnership with Russia is a cornerstone of their grand strategy to counter American power. A strong and friendly Russia on its northern border provides China with strategic depth, a reliable source of energy, and a powerful partner in international forums like the United Nations Security Council. To abandon Russia would be to concede a massive strategic victory to the United States, leaving China isolated to face a triumphant and emboldened West. It would be seen as a sign of weakness, both at home and abroad. Yet, the economic price of standing with Russia may be too high to pay. China's economy is already facing severe domestic headwinds, including a collapsing real estate market, unsustainable local government debt, record high youth unemployment, and flagging consumer confidence. An economic war with the United States, involving secondary sanctions on its banks and massive tariffs on its goods, could be the shock that turns this serious problem into a full-blown economic crisis. The Chinese Communist Party's legitimacy rests on its promise of delivering prosperity and stability. A severe economic downturn could pose a genuine threat to its hold on power. The leadership must now weigh which is the greater risk: the strategic cost of abandoning Russia or the economic cost of defying the United States. The shock waves of the American ultimatums are being felt across the globe. European leaders are reacting with a mixture of support and trepidation. On one hand, nations like Poland and the United Kingdom, who have been strong supporters of Ukraine, have applauded the American move as a necessary step to finally cut off Putin's war machine at its source. On the other hand, economic powerhouses like Germany are deeply worried. The German economy is heavily intertwined with China's, and a full-scale US-China economic war would have catastrophic consequences for German exporter and global supply chains. This has created yet another split within the Western alliance, with some urging the European unions to join the American pressure campaign and others calling for restraint and de-escalation, fearing the immense economic collateral damage. Russia has reacted with predictable condemnation, with Kremlin officials calling it an act of desperation by Washington. Privately, however, Moscow is watching Beijing's response with extreme anxiety. The entire Russian war strategy is predicated on the assumption of continued Chinese economic support. If that support is withdrawn, Russia's ability to sustain its war effort and its domestic economy would be thrown into grave doubt. The American ultimatum is the ultimate test of the no-limits friendship, and its outcome will determine Russia's fate. The world now waits for Beijing's response as the global order hangs in the balance, poised on the brink of a new and far more dangerous phase of great power competition. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to Sokhane Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first ones on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now. And we will continue to build the show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.